Hey guys, what is happening? This is Connor Talks, and this video is a description of why you should be swapping your Esky, your chili bin, your ice cooler for a 12-volt fridge right now if you're living in a camper van or a caravan or an RV or a motorhome. Get yourself a fridge, swap out the Esky, pay the extra money. It's definitely worth it, and let me tell you why. I currently have a 75-litre King's fridge, and it's on the cheaper end budget wise for a 12-volt fridge, but I've had it for just over a year now. I believe it has a 3 or a 5 year warranty, but I've had it for just over a year and it's been flawless for me. 75 litres is definitely enough for myself and my partner for a fridge. We probably could have had a smaller fridge and been fine with it, but we had the space, so we thought, why not chuck a bigger fridge in here and see how we go. Now, if you're watching this video and you currently have an Esky and you're wondering why you should listen to me for any advice on this matter, then please take a look at these photos on the screen right now. This was my old camper van. This was my first ever real van. It was a Suzuki APV, and I had the van for a good 3 years, I'd say, and I had the Esky in the back of that van for almost the entire time. From the instant I fitted out, I bought myself a 50-litre Esky from Bunnings. It was quite expensive, and 50 litres for an Esky is quite big, so there was a lot of food for myself, a lot of space for myself. But I had the Esky in the back of the van, and I thought, when I go camping, the Esky is going to be amazing because I'm going to have all my food in the Esky. I can chuck some ice in there. My food will be okay. I don't have to buy a big fridge. I don't have to spend a lot of money on a fridge. I don't have to spend a lot of money on like a second battery setup, potentially a solar panel setup to run the fridge. And it suited my needs at the time. Now, if you're just getting into camping and you're a weekend warrior, you go on the occasional trip for a couple of days, an Esky might suit your needs and your purposes. But if you're somebody who is living on the road more full time, then I would definitely recommend getting yourself a fridge. And this is coming from someone who's had both, who has lived on the road full time with both. And let me tell you why an Esky is a bad idea when you're full time in the van. Number one, ice. Ice is the biggest problem for somebody who owns an Esky, and I can tell you that from experience. When you're traveling in hotter countries like Australia, where I am and where I was when I had my Esky, you can get different quality Esky, so ice might last a little bit longer in one Esky versus another, depending on how much money you're willing to pay, but it will melt. And when it melts, your food will go off. And if you don't replace the ice, your food's done. Your drinks are done, your campsite's done, everything's done. Because you might have the most beautiful campsite set up and you might have found the most beautiful location, but every 2 or 3 days you've got to leave that campsite, go back into the nearest town, village or city, buy yourself a bag of ice, and then go back to your campsite, set up again, and then 2 or 3 days later you've got to do it all over again. And what used to happen with me is that I'd stay at a spot, and it used to be, a lot of the campsites I would stay at used to be like a first come first served basis. So I'd find a really nice spot in the corner of the campground. I'd be like, yeah, this is where I'm set up, this is the location. I'd stay there for 2 days, I'd open the Esky, and it had been 35, 45 degrees Celsius, and I'd go into the Esky on day 2 in the afternoon, and I'd be thinking, oh god, almost all of the ice is already melted in this Esky. I need to get ice soon. So then that next morning I have to leave, go to the servo, which might be 20-30 minutes away, just for a bag of ice, by the way, get some ice, drive all the way back, so the fuel you're spending going there and back as well, you've got to add that in. I'd go back to my spot, or I'd go back to my campground, and then my spot would be taken and I'd be gutted. And if you didn't go and get the ice after a couple of days, then your food would go off. There was so many times where I had milk that had you've got to remember, a lot of food goes off slowly. So you might have a red meat or a meat or something like chicken that goes off pretty quick. But milk is something that it will slowly go off and it will deteriorate quicker the warmer it is. So even if there's still a little bit of ice in the Esky, or there's still some cold water in there from the ice, the milk used by date is getting quicker and quicker because the temperature just isn't quite cold enough. The other thing with ice is that it costs money, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but over time, trust me, it gets expensive. In Australia, you're looking at anywhere from $3.50 to $7 for a bag of ice, depending on where you get it from and the size of the bag of ice. But let's just say on average you're paying $5 for a bag of ice. you're living full time on the road and you need to buy a bag of ice every 3 days. Well, that's like just over 2 bags a week. Let's call it 3 bags a week just for the sake of this. That's $15 a week you're spending on ice. That's $60 a month. And over the course of a year, well, I don't know exactly, but that's easily over 600 bucks. It starts getting pretty expensive, and when you take into account the cost of ice, the cost of fuel, your personal time to go and get ice, you start to realize that actually buying yourself a fridge, a solar panel, and another battery isn't such a bad option. Reason number 2 is that every single time you've got to cool your Esky down because you have food in there, you need to chuck your ice in the Esky. And Eskys are normally top loaded, so you open the top of the Esky, here's the opening, and you've got to pour the ice from the top into the Esky. The ice will normally settle at the bottom of the Esky, and then what happens when the ice melts? It creates a bit of water that sits all along the bottom of the Esky. I have lost count of the amount of times when I used to have an Esky that I would have like open cheese or some sort of open packet of food, fruit, vegetables, and what would happen is the ice would melt at the bottom of the Esky, and if you didn't pack your Esky perfectly and like layer things, you'd have like the cans at the bottom, you'd have milk next to it, and then you'd like slowly put your packets of meat on top, and then you put your veggies on that, just so that your veggies wouldn't fall in the water and like start to go rotten pretty quick. The amount of times when you're driving on a bumpy road that food would fall down the Esky into the water, and like you'd end up with like half a block of cheese soaking in water. You'd open your Esky 2 hours later and the stink that would come from it was unbearable, and it is such a pain. It doesn't sound like a big issue, like you might think, oh, that won't happen very often. Once is enough, but it happened to me 10, 20, 30 times over the course of a few years, where you've got your half open packet of something, and you might wrap it up as well. You might put cling wrap over the the pepperoni that's half opened, but you go on a bumpy road, the pepperoni like falls to the bottom of the Esky and then sits in the half melted ice and water, and the stink it creates is horrible. And the worst part about it is you have then got to take everything out of the Esky, you've got to pour the water and the ice out, you've got to clean it out, and then you've got to refill it with ice, and this is a process that like every few days you may have to do. And over the course of like traveling full time on the road, this is like such a pain. And yeah, this is like coming from someone who I used to be like full pro Esky, didn't really see the point in having a fridge in the van, or at least I saw the point in it, but I couldn't justify the expense that would come with having a fridge. And then you need to be able to power the fridge. But after having an Esky for a few years, I do not regret at all upgrading to the fridge. Doing some really simple maths with regards to a fridge and how much it might cost for you. This is in Australian dollars, by the way. Just doing some really quick research. You could get yourself a 200 watt Renogy solar panel for roughly 250 bucks. You could get yourself a 50 litre King's fridge for roughly $200. You could get yourself a 100 amp lithium battery from King's for another 250 bucks, and then all the wiring to put that all together might cost you additional $100. All of that together would allow you to have a fridge inside your motorhome or your camper van, and it would cost you roughly 800 bucks all in. And as we were discussing earlier, the cost of the Esky, it might only set you back 50 bucks or 150 bucks. But if you're full time on the road, the fact that you have to travel everywhere to get ice every few days, and the cost of ice itself, unless you've got yourself an ice machine, at which point you just question, why don't you have a fridge in the first place? But if you don't have an ice machine, then you're going to be going to get ice every few days. It's going to be costing you at least $5 a bag. You're going to be doing it 2 or 3 times a week. It's going to cost you $500, $700 over the course of a year. So that works out about the same as getting yourself a fridge. And having a 12 volt fridge saves you so much heartache. I can't tell you how much easier my life has been camping on the road since I've had a fridge. And I didn't realize it until I upgraded. Please let me know in the comments if you have an Esky, or if you used to have an Esky, what your experiences were like. I'd love to hear from other people, but I know from having an Esky for a good few years and now having a fridge for the past year, how much of a godsend it has been upgrading, and 1,000,000% worth the money. I think one of the best things for me with the fridge is knowing that I can adjust the temperature as well, and because I have 2 separate openings on my fridge, I can turn one of them into a 2°C fridge and the other one into a minus 18° freezer if I want, which means that I can have ice cream on the road. Unbelievable. Thank you guys very much for watching this video. I hope it was informative. I hope it was helpful. If you have any queries or questions, let me know in the comments, and bye.